Exploring Life. Chapter 1: The Study of Life. Part 1. This course stands apart from virtually anything else available today. It doesn't make arbitrary choices, it tells the full story of life, from the birth of the universe to the present day, connecting essential cross-disciplinary links, all within a single semester. It also has a purpose that goes far beyond academic credit. In this course, the story of life turns toward us, humans. We'll ask, what does all of this mean for your personal life? For our species? For the future of this planet? By the end, you'll be able to answer those questions. The insight you'll gain here rivals that of many recent biology graduates, and goes far beyond what most people ever learn about how nature works. Also, there's no dumbing down. You'll get clear, honest explanations of how scientific conclusions are reached, how reliable they are, and what they truly mean. Everything will be presented with respect for your intelligence, without being overwhelming or overbearing. We'll explore unique life forms and the remarkable adaptations that help them survive. It won't always be easy, but we'll use accessible language, helpful analogies, and a bit of humor to make the journey engaging. So, let's start from the basics. Biology is the scientific study of life and living organisms, their structure, function, growth, origin, evolution, and classification. It plays a vital role in fields like medicine, agriculture, environmental science, and biotechnology. By studying biology, we gain a deeper understanding of life and develop real-world solutions to biological challenges. Biology is a branch of science. And science is a systematic way of understanding the natural world through observation, measurement, and testing. It's based on a key assumption that the laws of nature are consistent and reliable, and that our experiences reflect an objective reality. In other words, science wouldn't work well if we were, say, living in a simulation, so we assume we're not. Science constantly evaluates how well ideas match the evidence, sorting them into consistent or inconsistent. As new evidence emerges, understanding evolves. That's what drives scientific progress. In this course, we define religion broadly, as any system of beliefs rooted in faith or spiritual tradition rather than physical evidence. Put simply, religion offers explanations that go beyond the physical world. Religious truth is typically shaped by spiritual insight and tradition. Ideas are considered true or false, and challenges to established doctrine are often discouraged or labeled heresy. Science and religion have long coexisted, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in conflict. Giordano Bruno's execution in 1600, for proposing an infinite universe and challenging theological views, reflects that tension. Yet at the same time, Jesuit scholars preserved an advanced scientific knowledge during the Middle Ages. And Gregor Mendel, the father of genetics, was an Augustinian monk who blended faith with scientific inquiry. Science has driven tremendous progress, but it has also caused harm. The same methods that produce weapons, including bioweapons, and enable unethical experiments also cure disease, expand food supplies, and help protect the environment. Science is a tool, its impact depends on how we use it. Without ethical restraint, it can be dangerous. Today, many people see science and religion not as enemies, but as complementary ways of understanding the world. It's not uncommon for scientists to hold deep spiritual beliefs, and for spiritual leaders to embrace scientific discoveries. Read the questions on this slide and think about your own experience. Have you ever encountered a situation where science and religion overlapped, or even conflicted? What was that experience like for you? The distinction and potential complementarity between science and spirituality can feel abstract. So let's make it simple. Imagine our understanding of the world as the solution to a Sudoku puzzle. The grid is the same for everyone, but the reasoning used to fill in each square can follow very different paths. Science approaches the puzzle through repeated testing. Each answer is checked against evidence, and when new information appears, old answers can be erased and replaced. Not every square is filled in, but that willingness to revise, refine, and improve isn't a weakness. It's one of science's greatest strengths. Religion or spirituality, on the other hand, may offer answers based on faith, like placing a capital A where a number might go. At first glance, that might seem out of place, even impossible within the puzzle's rules. But it can also carry meaning beyond numbers, like the value of a human life. And it doesn't need to be proven to be meaningful. Science adapts. Belief provides grounding. Together, they offer complementary ways of seeking truth, meaning, and understanding. Sometimes, understanding a scientific idea can feel overwhelming. There are just too many terms. But ironically, it's not the technical jargon that causes the most confusion, it's the familiar words. Terms like theory, law, and hypothesis are used all the time in everyday conversation. But in science, they have very specific, and often very different, meanings. And that gap in meaning is one of the biggest barriers to clear scientific communication. In everyday language, a theory is often seen as a guess or opinion. But in science, theories are well-supported explanations backed by extensive evidence. Scientific laws, unlike legal laws, don't tell us what should happen, they describe what does happen, consistently, in nature. They often use mathematical relationships to show how the natural world behaves. In daily life, a hypothesis is often just a hunch. But in science, a hypothesis is a carefully crafted, testable explanation for what we observe. It can be supported or rejected through rigorous testing, but never absolutely proven or disproven. Scientific hypotheses are precise and designed for thorough evaluation through experimentation. Let's review a few well-known examples of scientific theories and laws, plus one example of a hypothesis. The Big Bang Theory explains the origin of the universe. Cell theory states that all living things are made of cells. Newton's first law describes motion and the forces acting on objects. Mendel's laws explain how traits are inherited. And finally, a hypothesis, like all tulips have the same number of petals, is a testable idea based on observation. Science uses two main types of reasoning. Inductive reasoning starts with specific observations and leads to a general idea, like how Darwin formed his theory of natural selection. Deductive reasoning works the other way. It starts with a general principle and applies it to specific cases, like predicting traits using Mendelian genetics. This figure shows how inductive reasoning moves from specific observations to general conclusions, while deductive reasoning starts with general principles to reach specific outcomes. Both play a key role in forming and testing hypotheses, helping science move forward across many fields. There are two main types of scientific research. Discovery science begins by collecting observations and measurements to find patterns. Hypothesis-based science starts with an idea or assumption and tests whether it holds true in specific situations. Here's a recent example of discovery science in action. The olinguito is a small mammal native to Colombia and Ecuador. For years, it was mistaken for a close relative, the olingo. But in 2013, scientists officially identified it as a new species. Genetic studies and careful observation revealed unique traits: smaller size, denser fur, and a distinct skull shape. It's a perfect example of how observation and evidence can lead to major discoveries, even today. Hypothesis-based science starts with a testable idea. For example, a researcher might hypothesize that a new drug will reduce symptoms of a disease. They would then design experiments to see if that's true. Through rigorous testing, they evaluate the effect, and the hypothesis is either supported or rejected. Hypothesis-based science might sound complicated, but it's something you already use. Imagine you see dark clouds and think, it might rain. You grab an umbrella, just in case. That's observation, prediction, and drawing conclusions. Science uses the same logic, but adds structure, evidence, and controls. This structured approach is called the scientific method. It's how science investigates and explains the world. It starts with observation, noticing something curious. Then comes a hypothesis, a possible explanation. Next is experimentation, testing that hypothesis in a controlled way. Finally, scientists draw conclusions from the results, which often lead to new observations, and the cycle begins again. The logic behind the scientific method is similar to everyday reasoning. But science takes it further. It follows a strict framework, uses carefully controlled conditions, and involves precise planning. So, how does a typical experiment actually work? Every good experiment identifies a few key components. The independent variable, what the researcher changes on purpose. The dependent variable, what responds to that change. The experimental group receives the change. The control group remains unchanged for comparison. By comparing the two, scientists can draw conclusions about cause and effect. Now that we know the key parts of any good experiment, let's see them in action, one from biology, one from everyday student life. Experiment 1 is about fertilizer and plant growth. The independent variable is the application of fertilizer, and the dependent variable is plant growth, measured by height or yield. The control group has no fertilizer, the experimental group does. Experiment 2 is about study methods and learning. Here, the independent variable is the application of a study method, flashcards versus rereading. The dependent variable is exam score. Students who reread notes are the control group. Those who use flashcards are the experimental group. Different contexts, same structure, that's the scientific method at work. We've explored what science is and how it works. In part 2 of the lecture, we'll take a closer look at where its boundaries lie.